From the banks of the Colorado River in Lake Mead to the homes and businesses in Southern Nevada, welcome to Water Smarts, the podcast pumping from the heart of Las Vegas, where we engage with the experts who keep the water flowing throughout Southern Nevada. I'm Bronson Mack.
And I'm Zuelke. From how we treat it, deliver it, use it, protect it, and conserve it, the Water Smarts podcast is all about water in Southern Nevada. We hope to make you a little smarter about the one thing that keeps us all connected: water.
Hey, Crystal, how are you today?
I'm good, Bronson. It's getting warm. It's summertime. That means I'm drinking more of my mineral-rich Rocky Mountain water straight from the tap.
Nice. You source that directly from the tap in your kitchen?
Always have.
Gosh. Hey, have you ever gone to that tap in your kitchen and turned it on and nothing came out?
Never.
Never. Right? Well,
No.
that's just kind of a testament to not only the infrastructure that we have, but the water delivery that occurs every single day. And let's also keep in mind that not only does that water get delivered, but that water gets delivered high quality, meeting or surpassing drinking water standards.
Yes, it does. And I know, we're pretty passionate about water around here, for obvious reasons. But
a little bit.
And I know that a lot of people, we hear it. You've heard it out talking to groups of people. I hear it. I see it with my team does the website and social media. So we see a lot of comments whenever we talk about our water. People comment about the taste. They don't like it. Las Vegas water is yucky. But, it's not. And we have proof that it's not. So, there's ways to deal with it. If you don't love the taste of our tap water, there's ways that you can enhance it and make it a little bit more up to your standards. But it doesn't mean it's not safe, it's not good, it's not healthy. It's all those things and more.
And it's mineral rich, just like you said. And those minerals naturally occurring calcium and magnesium makes our water very hard here. Does give our water a bit of a taste. However, again, that water is of high quality, meeting or surpassing drinking water standards. It is safe for you and me and your family to drink. And today, to explain how Southern Nevada's water quality experts work around the clock to protect your drinking water, and to answer some common questions that we get from customers and members of the public, we have Carolyn Faircloth, the manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority's Water Quality Laboratory. Carolyn, welcome to the Water Smarts podcast.
Hi, Bronson. Crystal, thanks again for having me on the show again.
Well, Carolyn, we're certainly happy to have you here on the podcast. Thanks for carving out a little bit of time for us. We know you operate a very busy laboratory, and we're going to get to some questions and concerns from our listeners and from the public. But before we do that, could you just provide our listeners with a little bit of background about Southern Nevada's water quality? How does the Water Authority and its member agencies ensure that our water is of high quality and that it is meeting all of the safety requirements under the Safe Drinking Water Act?
Absolutely, Bronson. So the Southern Nevada Water Authority has a world-class water testing and treatment facility, 2 treatment facilities that ensure that we're providing that safe drinking water for our community. We have state-of-the-art water quality lab with certified employees, licensed employees, from field specialists to analysts, scientists that operate sophisticated instrumentation for both the compliance laboratory and research and development fields. So the compliance laboratory is required to meet local, state, and federal regulations for the EPA, Safe Drinking Water Act. And so we go above and beyond those requirements. Last year, we just collected more than 55,000 water quality samples. With those water quality samples, we were able to conduct 320,000 analyses. So the types of things that we're regulating or monitoring for are 91 EPA-regulated compounds, 75 unregulated compounds. And we're monitoring the water system 24 hours a day, every day, whether it's through that physical sample collection and testing or, operators monitoring online analyzers, online equipment. SNWA is doing everything we can to ensure we're delivering high quality water to your tap.
And I personally love this topic because, I grew up here. I've said this multiple times on this podcast. I drink the tap water. I always have. I don't think twice about it. I've been doing it since as long as I can remember. And after working for the Southern Nevada Water Authority, I'm much more aware of how we treat and test the water. And so I'm much more comfortable filling up my reusable water bottles straight from the tap. And I love to educate and talk about it with other people. But not everyone who lives here knows about our treatment processes, Carolyn, and why our drinking water is treated and tested even more than bottled water. So can you explain how do we do that? How do we treat the water supply?
Crystal, our source water is very clean to begin with. So 90% of our water source is from the Colorado River. 10%, if you're in the Las Vegas Valley, comes from groundwater wells. But for the water from Colorado River, we draw that water from Lake Mead, which in 2015, intake number 3 was brought online and into production. That allowed us to have access to higher quality water, colder temperature water, which is great for the treatment process overall. So we have, like I mentioned, 2 state-of-the-art water treatment facilities that can in total treat up to 900 million gallons per day of water. And with that, we use ozonation. So we use ozone to destroy bacteria and other microorganisms, pathogens, cryptosporidium, things like that. It's a very strong and effective disinfectant. And it also helps with taste attributes because it's killing all those organisms and we're not having to put as much chemicals into the treatment process. So also we have, a multi-stage filtration process that helps to remove particles from the water. We chlorinate, so we have chlorination as disinfectant. As the water, leaves the plant, it's got to be protected as it travels on its way through the pipes and through the system to homes and businesses. So the chlorine really helps with continuing that disinfection of microorganisms. SNWA is always looking for ways to improve our operations, investing and maintaining and improving our water quality infrastructure on a continuous basis. And just a fun fact, a few years ago, the treatment plants received the Partnership for Safe Waters Excellence in Water Treatment Award. I know that's a mouthful, but at the time, only 14 water facilities had received that award. And so it's a really big deal. And it shows what we do in our treatment process and how advanced we are in the treatment of the water supply.
Yeah, and Carolyn, when you think about that commitment, right, the commitment of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, the commitment of the experts and the scientists and the chemists and the operators that are all treating our water every single day, moving that water through the system, I mean, that commitment that the Water Authority has really is second to none. I mean, we are talking about human health and safety here, and that would go for any municipal water agency. The other member agencies of the Water Authority, the City of Henderson, North Las Vegas, Boulder City, Big Bend Water District in Laughlin, and then, of course, the Las Vegas Valley Water District, they also do a little bit of additional effort to protect that water quality as it makes its way to the tap. So can you just give our listeners just a quick little taste of what are some of those things that water purveyors, the water utilities do? Even though they're getting high-quality water from SNWA, what do they do to maintain it all the way to the tap?
Yeah, so that's really important that each public water system is reviewing the data that we provide, right? So you mentioned that there's a lot of all the different public water systems out there that are monitoring in addition, to Las Vegas Valley. We've got Boulder City, we've got Kyle Canyon Water District and down to Laughlin. And so I don't think a lot of people know that SNWA is not just testing Las Vegas Valley Water District, we're testing water quality across the different municipal agencies that we serve. And so the Water Authority and the member agencies, we're conducting numerous tests on the distribution system. So it's not just the testing that's done at the water treatment plants. We collect samples from various facilities, from neighborhood water quality sample stations. We have over 1,000 sample sites ranging from reservoirs to groundwater wells to meter box sample stations, above ground sample stations. Those are where we're collecting our samples. We even collect samples from hose bibs in some of the smaller systems, Searchlight, Kyle Canyon, as I mentioned. And so we're in various pockets of the valley doing all that water quality sample collection and testing. Something that's interesting too is in the field, sometimes we'll get questions when we're in those meter boxes or in some of those other spots asking if since we're having to flush the water, that's part of the sampling procedure, sampling protocol. We do have to flush the water for about 5 minutes, but we do get the question of whether or not that's going to show up on the customer's bill. And just to note, that is done prior to the meter. So residents are not receiving that as part of their bill.
So conservation obviously remains important, but we do have to expend a little bit of water in order to make sure that we're getting good samples and we're getting reliable samples that can be tested and treated, right? So there's a little bit of water that gets used in that process in order to collect those samples. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's part of the EPA sampling protocols, best practices, things like that. So we want to make sure that what we're collecting is representative of the distribution system water that's coming into the homes or into the businesses. And so, yes, while that perception may be that we're, wasting water or something like that, we really are following our protocols. But something that we've tried to do too is kind of in hand with conservation is we try to preserve that sample, and we might water somebody's plant with it or reuse it in the system as well.
And just along those lines of, continuing to talk about sampling and how important it is that we do that, it's important to note that when one of the water providers or a water authority staff member goes into a neighborhood to collect a water sample for testing, they're drawing it from outside a customer's home. So they're not going to knock on your door and ask to come inside and test your tap water from the kitchen sink or the bathroom faucet. This often comes up from time to time. People wonder if we're asking if it's really the water district or another municipality at their home conducting business. And so we want to just make sure that everybody understands if someone is at your door saying they work for a water company and they need to come inside for a water sample, they're most likely a salesperson or possibly worse. We tell customers to keep in mind and look out for imposters. Water utility employees drive official vehicles. They're always clearly marked. They wear ID badges, and they should never, ever, ever ask to come inside your home. They will not ask for payment as well. So we just want to stress to people that you always should be aware of your surroundings, but be able to identify a legit water authority or water district official or of another municipality. A lot of times these door-to-door visitors will give you the impression they represent one of us and their need to test the water, but don't fall for it. Most of the time, these are just salespeople trying to scare you into buying one of their water filtering products that come with service agreements for multiple years. But Carolyn, it does bring up the topic of home water treatment systems like reverse osmosis units that may improve the taste of the tap or water softeners that help with water hardness that we often experience here. Can you talk about whether these filters are necessary or even beneficial to somebody?
Absolutely, Crystal. So home water treatment systems are not a necessity, I would say, but more of a personal preference. The water quality, again, that we have in Lake Mead is very good as our source water because it's protected from a lot of your industrial or agricultural influences. So our water is already very, very clean to begin with. Some people don't like the taste of the water, as you mentioned, the hardness, which is the high mineral content, and the addition of chlorine that we have to do to protect the health of the public. And so the home water treatment systems can improve taste, again, personal preference, but you can also improve the taste with simple measures. You can take an orange or a lemon slice, refrigerate your glass. You can take an SF-approved water pitcher or carafe that's got the filter in there, and that can help improve the taste. Some people complain of milky water or cloudy water. That's typically caused by air bubbles, and that's usually around summertime when we're running our groundwater wells in production, and we get a lot of that entrained air from just the nature of the groundwater wells in the system. And so you can let your water, fill up your glass, let the water sit for a couple of minutes just to let those air bubbles dissipate. Those water softeners, while they can reduce hardness, the Colorado River has a high mineral content. It's got a lot of magnesium and calcium. This is not a safety issue, but it is important to remember that if you do use a water softener or install a water softener, that it's really important to regularly maintain that system, make sure that you're filling it with whatever sodium, potassium, things like that it needs, or changing out those filters or whatever the case may be to make sure that you're getting that optimum treatment. And then there's also things like dishwasher rinse aids and laundry detergent with water softening aids that can kind of help with some of that hardness issue that some people don't like.
Well, Carolyn, I'm glad that you brought up some of those home filtration systems and water softeners. Very common here in Southern Nevada. A lot of folks have water softeners, and that makes sense. I mean, again, our water is hard, doesn't affect the quality of the water, but that hardness can, dry out your skin or leave the water spots on your dishes or on your shower door. So we see a lot of water softeners. And then you mentioned NSF certified filtration systems. And just for clarity, NSF is the National Sanitation Foundation. It's a third-party group that really does product testing for public health and safety. So a lot of times you'll see your appliances in your kitchen might have a sticker or a mark on them that say that they're NSF certified. So just making sure that whatever treatment or filtration system you have at your home, just make sure that it is meeting all of those safety standards, and looking for that NSF certification is certainly one way to do that. Now, Carolyn, Crystal brought up the door-to-door sales of water filtration. And those seem to kind of come in waves where you'll have door-to-door sales folks that are trying to sell filtration systems that have multi-year contracts associated with them, and you have to only use their replacement filters. And it can get a little bit confusing, but one of the things that a lot of times these sales folks do is they utilize a TDS meter to really show that there's high total dissolved solids within water. And, the general public doesn't usually understand what that means. They just see this little device gets placed in the water and there's a big flashing number that comes up. And then all of a sudden they're going, okay, so sign here for your multi-year filtration agreement. Can you just talk a little bit about total dissolved solids, TDS, and those TDS meters? What should people know about total dissolved solids when it comes to the quality of our drinking water?
As you mentioned, TDS stands for total dissolved solids, and that consists of minerals, so the magnesium, calcium that we talked about earlier, but it also can consist of metals and ions and other just dissolved solids in the water. What TDS is as water falls to the ground, either as rain or in our case, snow melt from the Rocky Mountains, it dissolves those minerals that are present in the rocks and in the soil as that water is passing through. So as it dissolves the minerals, they remain in the water at varying levels and concentrations. And here in Southern Nevada, we have a lot of calcium, magnesium, and that's why our water is considered hard. So the hard water is in relation to TDS. Now, TDS, though, is an EPA drinking water secondary standard that we do monitor. The EPA national limit, a federal limit, is 500 milligrams per liter or parts per million. Nevada, actually, the secondary limit is 1,000 because Nevada, state of Nevada knows that, the Colorado River, we just have a lot of the calcium, magnesium minerals in our geology. So a lot of times people will contact us and say that they have a TDS meter or a quote unquote parts per million meter. A lot of times the result that they're getting when they're testing their water may be over that 500, which looks scary because that's the national limit. But here in Nevada, our limit is actually set to 1,000. And again, that's a secondary standard. It's not a primary standard. So secondary standards are more of like aesthetic purposes. So that's what TDS is considered, like color or odor, things like that. And so we are monitoring for that. And I know that while people can obtain these TDS handheld meters, because they are fairly inexpensive, I think I saw them online for like $10 was one of the meters, right? So while you can't find them and get them in your hands, they may not be all that accurate. So here in the lab, we have highly sensitive, certified instrumentation that we're using to run these analyses, including TDS. And so I hesitate for people to use those TDS meters and panic with that because, again, it's something that SNWA is monitoring closely to make sure that our water quality is of the highest quality.
Yeah, in total dissolved solids, as you said, it's more of an aesthetic issue. It's not a safety issue for the water. I'm glad that you brought up the sensitive instrumentation that is used at the laboratory to do all of this testing and analysis. I mean, it's a little more sophisticated than a handheld meter that you can buy on Amazon, that's for sure. Carolyn, hey, just another question when it comes to water quality. And this one is related to the water quality report. If the public wants to know what's in their drinking water, and certainly we as the water provider, we want them to know what's in their drinking water. So what is the way in which the public can find out what is in their drinking water?
SNWA is required to provide each public water system, so Las Vegas Valley Water District, City of Henderson, North Las Vegas, etc. We're required to provide water quality testing results each year. Those public water systems then are required to produce an annual water quality report by July 1st for consumers to be able to review what is in their water. So the way that customers or consumers are going to get that notice is that letter is going to be through the mail. It can be found on your water provider's website. So it could be on the Las Vegas Valley Water District, or if you are in like City of Henderson, City of North Las Vegas, it's going to be on your utilities website, or you can go to snwa.com and find links to all those reports. And generally, they're required to include the source of the water supply. There's going to be a list of monitored contaminants, which I think some people expect kind of this big list of everything that we're testing, but really it's going to be what was detected. So you're going to see the levels that were detected, the concentrations that were detected, as well as those EPA or state limits. You're also going to be able to see where you can find a more extensive water assessment. This kind of the similar results as far as the SNWA test results, because the Water Authority is that wholesale provider. So depending on what the source is, you may see data for like the River Mountains Water Treatment Facility, AMS Water Treatment Facility, AMS being Alfred Merritt Smith. All those links, though, can be found under the water quality on the SNWA website.
And these water quality reports are a great resource to find out exactly what's in our drinking water. So even down to the parts per million and billion. And I think, Carolyn, even we're able to measure down to the parts per trillion in some cases. The reports are a great resource to see what the Water Authority is monitoring for and how we measure up to the local, state, and national standards. One of the things we're hearing more and more about is PFAS. We read comments on our social media channels, we get sometimes phone calls, and we get lots of questions about PFAS. Can you explain what PFAS are and what the Water Authority is doing to monitor these substances?
Absolutely, Crystal. PFAS are a big concern right now, as you mentioned, not just here, but around the world, because of health concerns such as developmental effects or delays in children, low birth weights, certain types of cancer. So understandably, it's a concern. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and it's pretty much man-made chemicals that were used in just a vast array of consumer and industrial products since the 1940s. The problem with them is that they bioaccumulate, so they don't break down, and they just kind of continue to build up. It's not that they don't break down. It's that it takes a long time to break down. So they'll just kind of continue to build up over time. And so the reason is that they have this strong carbon-fluorine bond that allows them to continue to accumulate in the environment as well as, in the bodies of animals and people. So it was used in fabrics and stain-resistant carpets, household cleaning products, firefighting foams, all sorts of different places. And so it's become an issue now in our world. Under the EPA, Safe Drinking Water Act, we have to test for what's called UCMR, unregulated contaminant monitoring rules. And so SNWA and its member agencies are looking at 29 PFAS compounds, because there is just a whole slew of different compounds, but we're looking at 29 of them, and then also lithium. Each public water system is scheduled for a specific time frame, or in this case, a specific year. So for example, Las Vegas Valley Water District is scheduled for monitoring in 2025. Some cities across the nation, you might be hearing, have results already out there for this monitoring that they're doing under UCMR, but that's just because the EPA And states may have scheduled those sooner than others. So we have through 2025 to complete that monitoring. And so that's what we're going to be looking at here in the very near future. Most recent development with EPA is that they finalized the PFAS rule in April 2024. So what that means is that in addition to the UCMR5 monitoring that we're doing, we are now also going to be monitoring for additional years through 2027 to kind of get a baseline and get an idea of if there's additional water treatment that's going to be necessary at the water treatment facilities or other sources. That's going to be important here in the next several years to identify. And just to note, SNWA researchers, while it may not have been for compliance purposes, researchers have been studying and testing for PFAS for over a decade, just in various locations. Also, just want to note that ways that customers can kind of help reduce PFAS exposure in their lives is just learning more about it, right? So going on to like EPA.gov, there's a whole website kind of dedicated to PFAS. There's a lot of great material in there, how they found it, why it's important to know more about it, why we're doing this monitoring. And there's the, tips like, replacing old worn materials to new non-PFAS materials. So like cookware, right? Nonstick cookware, things like that. Things like avoiding eating fish in waterways that are impacted by PFAS. If people want to go to EPA.gov, it has a lot of resources under the PFAS section of the website.
Yeah, PFAS really emerging as a water quality issue. But like you said, Carolyn, Southern Nevada Water Authority researchers have not only been researching PFAS for more than a decade, but really pioneered a lot of the research within this area of water quality. These contaminants, or these chemicals, I guess I should say, are ubiquitous. They are everywhere. You mentioned a couple things, it's in stain-resistant carpet, it's in microwave popcorn and pizza boxes and waterproof clothing. I mean, even in air fryers. If you look at your air fryer, it probably has a warning with regards to some of the chemicals that are used in air fryers. But the good news is with all of the research that has been done and the testing that has been done, Southern Nevada's water supply is already meeting these new standards that have been established by the EPA. We're already in really good shape. That's just, again, Southern Nevada Water Authority being ahead of the curve when it comes to not just water quality, but just overall water resource management. Hey, Carolyn, let me ask you this. We talked a little bit about the taste of the water and the monitoring that goes on. What about the smell of the water? We do get calls or questions on social media about what the perceived smell or odor is associated with tap water. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the common odors that people ask you about when it comes to our drinking water?
Yes, I can. Two common complaints that we receive are the smell of rotten eggs or kind of that sewer odor. For the sewer odor, you really need to determine the source. So what we always recommend or instruct a customer to do is to fill a clean glass with water from your cold water tap. Step outside of that particular room or kitchen or wherever it may be with the glass and then smell that water that's in the glass after a few seconds. If there's no odor, then the problem is most likely the sink drain, which accounts for 99% of the time. So the way to kind of clean out and deodorize, I guess, the sink drain or garbage disposal is to run the garbage disposal, clear it of any food that's sitting in there, right? Flush with hot water for about 15 seconds, pour about half a cup of baking soda and then slowly a cup of white vinegar down the drain. Let that sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then run hot water down the garbage disposal and run the garbage disposal until all those food particles go away. That should remove any kind of bacterial growth from food particles and things like that are causing those offending odors. Following that process regularly, weekly, will help eliminate those odors in the future. It's not that it's sewage backup, it's just things that are helpful in trying to kind of eliminate those odors.
And I have to assume that if you have an odor associated with the water coming out of the taps in your house, you're likely going to have that same odor coming from all of the taps in your house. So if you're only picking up an odor at one particular sink, then yeah, it is very likely to be the drain on that sink, that P-trap, that is part of your sink's plumbing. You can look right under the sink. You'll see that little U-shaped pipe that is there to keep water in that U shape so that those sewer gases can't migrate back up the drain. But another one that's always key is on your bathroom sink, there is an overflow hole or two. It might be on the front side of the sink or the back side of the sink, so that if the sink begins to fill with water, water flows through that overflow hole so it doesn't flow and flood your entire house. And that can also be another area, and especially when you're brushing your teeth and you lean over the sink, you get your nose pretty close to that hole, you might be picking up a little bit of sewer odor from that as well.
That's a very good point, Bronson. Thank you for pointing that out. Another complaint that we get is a rotten egg odor. So it's the same kind of thing. You know, we instruct customers to fill up their glass with the cold water tap again, step out of the room, smell the water in the glass. If that rotten egg odor is still there, then it could be your settings, the heat settings on your water heater. Typically 120 degrees Fahrenheit is the best setting, but it's really important to refer to your manufacturer for the water heater. If a thermostat's set too high, water can get overheated. This may cause, a backup into cold water lines, causing that warmer water to come out of that cold tap and maybe get a little bit of that odor. Also, if a thermostat is set too low on your water heater, it can encourage the growth of thermophilic bacteria. That can also cause some of those odors. So adjusting that water heater to that manufacturer's recommended setting is really important. Sometimes having the water heater shut off for a long period of time, if somebody's traveling or something like that, you can also kind of generate that rotten egg odor. And so in that water heater, typically there's that metal that's used as a sacrificial anode. And so that can reduce naturally occurring sulfate in the water to hydrogen sulfide gas, causing that rotten egg odor. So it's important to really be knowledgeable about your water heater. If you have any questions, get that licensed plumber, professional out to help you with any questions or assistance needed.
Well, Carolyn, lots of good information there with regards to the quality of Southern Nevada's drinking water, what it takes day in and day out to protect that quality, ensuring that every time you go to the tap, you've got the reliability and the confidence that that water is meeting or surpassing federal and state drinking water standards. Carolyn Faircloth, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Water Smarts podcast and helping make all of our listeners, including myself, a little bit smarter about our water quality.
Thank you, Bronson and Crystal. It's always a pleasure coming here talking with you about what SNWA Laboratory continues to do each and every day to ensure safe drinking water for our community.
Well, Crystal, another good conversation. I love when we get a focus on water quality and pull back on the curtain a little bit and help people understand that there is a ton of work that goes into protecting water quality and testing and analysis and all of that. I mean, there's an entire laboratory full of PhDs and chemists that are all working to make sure that that water is safe for you.
Yeah. And, there's so many things that we consume where you don't really know a lot about it or where it comes from. You don't investigate. But our water, we're so transparent about that because, as you mentioned earlier, it's a health and human service, and it's a right to have water. So it's important for us. And I mean, I was confident about our water before I even worked for the Water Authority and really truly understood what goes into it. But we've talked about this before on here, that it is a far better choice than buying bottled water that takes much more resources to bottle within that plastic bottle.
Totally.
The cost of it, also not as regulated and monitored as our tap water is. So,
yep. And the other thing about bottled water, a lot of the bottled water that's out there is sourced from a municipal water supply. So they're already bottling a pretty good quality water that has gone through a lot of the normal treatment, the same kind of treatment that we're doing here in Southern Nevada, but then it goes through the added addition of reverse osmosis. And if you think a little bit about bottled water, you look at the label on your bottle of water and see where it is bottled. It very well may be bottled in Southern California. And then now just consider that bottle of water was loaded onto the back of the truck. It was driven across the state line. It was then delivered here. I mean, that is water that has an enormous carbon footprint. There is some obviously local options too. If you are somebody who is just dead set against drinking tap water and only want to drink bottled water, you might want to consider like a bottled water delivery service like a Sparklets or something like that. It's bottled locally, it's delivered locally, has a smaller carbon footprint, but just keep in mind that that water that is coming out of your tap meets or surpasses those drinking water standards. You can drink it with confidence. I made all of my kids' baby bottles directly with Southern Nevada tap water right out of Lake Mead, and they're fine. They have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and they're doing just fine in school. So remember, the water that is being delivered to you is of the highest quality, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there is testing that is going on. Christmas Day, Thanksgiving Day, middle of the night, there is constantly testing and analysis that is being done on water samples collected from your neighborhood and neighborhoods throughout Southern Nevada. Well, that's it for this episode here on the Water Smarts Podcast. We want you to subscribe and join us here next time. And if you like the show, feel free to give us a rating. Helps us reach more people in Southern Nevada and make them a little bit water smarter as well. And if you'd like more information about water conservation, water quality, new technology, and everything having to do with Southern Nevada water, you can find most of that information, including tips and videos and other resources, on snwa.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you join us here next time on Water Smarts.